The palace of the alien queen stood high on the cliffs, its towers reaching the clouds, its walls made of black stone that shone like glass in the light of the twin suns. But inside the great halls there was no laughter, no sound of music, no voice of children, only silence. The queen sat on her throne of crystal, her crown heavy upon her head, her heart even heavier. Weeks had passed, but still no word came of her missing daughters. They had vanished one night without a trace. The guards searched the palace, the city, the forests beyond, but they found nothing. No footsteps, no torn fabric, no broken toys. It was as if the two little girls had been swallowed by the stars themselves. Every morning the queen would walk down the long golden hallway that led to the children's chambers. She would open the door, hoping she had been caught in some cruel dream, hoping to see them sleeping on their soft beds. But every time she opened the door, she saw the same thing: empty sheets, cold pillows, and the toys left untouched. She stood in the doorway with her hand pressed against her chest, fighting the ache that grew stronger each day. The palace staff whispered behind her back. They said perhaps the girls had been taken by raiders, perhaps sold in the dark markets beyond the border. Others said maybe they ran away into the mountains, afraid of something they never told. But the queen did not believe these words. Her daughters were too young, too innocent, too fragile. Someone had taken them. She could feel it in her bones. The advisors begged her to accept the loss. They said she must prepare to name a new heir. But she shook her head, her eyes burning with fire. "They are not dead," she said again and again. "I would know if their light was gone." Yet each night when she lay in her bed, the silence of the palace pressed down on her, and for the first time in her long life, the queen wept. Outside the palace walls, life went on, the markets filled with noise, merchants called to sell fruit, fabric, weapons. The children of the city ran through the streets, playing games, laughing, their voices echoing through the stone alleys. But for the queen, every laugh cut deep, reminding her of what she lost. One evening, as the sun set behind the horizon and the sky turned red and gold, the queen stood alone. On the balcony, her long robe blowing in the wind, she looked down at the world and whispered, "Where are you, my daughters? Do you still live? Do you still breathe?" Her voice carried into the air, but only silence answered. Far below, hidden in the shadow of the cliffs, a figure moved across the wastelands. A human, tall and weary, his clothes torn from travel, his arms wrapped around two small shapes. He walked slowly, every step heavy with exhaustion. But he did not stop. The two little girls clung to his chest, their faces pressed into his coat, their breaths soft and warm. He whispered to them, "Rest now, little ones, I will keep you safe, no harm will touch you while I live." But the queen did not know, not yet. She only knew the emptiness, only the loss. She turned from the balcony and returned to the silent hall, her footsteps echoing, her crown glinting in the dim light. She walked past the statues of her ancestors, past the banners of victories long ago, yet she felt no pride, no triumph, only a hollow pain. In the great hall, the guards bowed their heads as she passed, but none dared to speak. They had failed her. They had failed the royal bloodline. The queen lifted her hand and dismissed them. She wanted no company. She wanted only the truth, but truth was nowhere to be found. That night, a storm gathered in the skies. Rain fell hard against the palace roof. Thunder shook the ground. The queen sat by the window, staring into the darkness. She thought she saw shadows move beyond the gates, a flicker of light, a figure in the rain, but when she looked again, there was nothing, just water and stone. She closed her eyes, whispering her daughters' names. The palace was silent. But outside in the storm, the human carried the children closer to safety. His path was dangerous, and eyes already watched him from the hills. Hunters, raiders, strangers who cared nothing for the bond between a mother and her daughters. And so the queen dreamed of graves while the truth lived only a few valleys away, held tightly in human arms. The days stretched into weeks, and the alien queen's palace grew colder. The once lively halls that echoed with laughter now carried only whispers and footsteps. Tapestries that once celebrated victories now seemed heavy, as though they mourned with their queen. The council gathered each morning in the round chamber. Their voices low and cautious, they argued about duty, about the throne, about the future of the empire, but never about the truth that mattered most: the missing daughters. The queen sat silent at the head of the table, her golden eyes sharp, her face unreadable. When the council begged her to name a successor, she rose to her feet, her voice like steel. "My children are not dead. I will not name another while their hearts still beat." The chamber fell into silence. None dared to challenge her. Outside, the walls of the palace, the city changed too. Flowers were laid at the gates, candles burned through the night. The people prayed for the safe return of the royal children. Some wept openly, others cursed the heavens. Yet with each passing day, hope faded. The people whispered that even the queen's power could not bring the girls back. In the quiet corners of the city, rumors spread like wildfire. Some said slavers from the dark markets had stolen the princesses. Others claimed strange beasts from the mountains took them. One tale even spoke of spirits, but no story brought comfort. All only deepened the fear that the girls were gone forever. The queen walked the palace at night, her steps slow and heavy. She passed their empty rooms, their small toys untouched, their books stacked neatly. She would stop at the beds, touching the blankets with trembling hands, whispering their names. "My little ones, where have you gone?" Her voice cracked, but still she refused to believe they were lost. Far from the palace, across the wastelands and through the forests, the human traveler carried his secret. The two alien children clung to him, their large, bright eyes watching, the world with both fear and wonder. He found shelter in caves, fed them with stolen bread, gave them water from rivers. At night he kept them warm with his own body, his coat spread wide to shield them from the cold. The girls were weak but alive. They asked questions in soft voices. "Why do you help us? Why do you not leave us like the others?" The human only smiled, brushing dust from their cheeks. "Because no child should be alone," he whispered. "Because someone out there is waiting for you." The human's journey was not easy. Hunters roamed the land, drawn by the whispers of missing royal blood. Mercenaries believed the girls were worth a fortune. Their faces appeared in crude sketches, nailed to market posts. "Wanted, alive," the posters said, and so the human kept to the shadows, his heart heavy with fear, but he never slowed his pace. Back in the palace, the queen's strength began to fade. She locked herself in the sacred chamber where the great fire burned. She knelt before it, hands shaking, and prayed to the stars. "If they still live, guide me to them. If they still breathe, show me a sign." Her tears fell onto the floor. The fire crackled, but the heavens stayed silent. The people of the city began to move on. Life could not stop. Markets reopened. Festivals tried to bring joy. Yet no sound of celebration reached the queen's heart. She watched from her high window, seeing families together, children laughing, and she turned away each time, the sight too painful. But one night a merchant arrived at the gates, rain pouring down his cloak. He knelt before the guards, his voice urgent. "I saw him," he whispered. "I saw a human carrying two little girls in his arms. He moved through the storm like a ghost. He hid them close. I swear it was them." The guards froze. The rumor spread quickly. By dawn it reached the queen herself. Her chest tightened, her eyes wide with hope and fear. Was it possible? Was it real, or just another cruel story to break her heart? She gripped the arm of her throne, her knuckles white. "Find him," she ordered, her voice trembling. "Search. Every road, every forest, every market, bring me this human." And so the kingdom mourned by day, while in the shadows a flicker of hope grew. The queen did not yet know that her daughters were alive. But for the first time since their disappearance, the silence inside the palace cracked, replaced by a heartbeat of possibility. Far beyond the walls, in the shelter of an old ruined barn, the human sat with the two girls sleeping against him, rain dripping through the broken roof. He closed his tired eyes and whispered, "Soon, little ones, soon you will see your mother again." His voice soft, but in his heart, he knew the journey was far from over. Danger waited at every turn, and in the palace the queen whispered into the darkness, "Hold on, my children. Hold on, for I am coming." The storm had passed, leaving the land wet and heavy with mist. The human traveler stepped carefully along the narrow path through the woods, his boots sinking in the mud, his arms wrapped around the two small alien girls. They clung to him tightly, their little faces hidden in his coat, their breaths warm against his chest. He looked tired, his eyes hollow from many sleepless nights, yet he did not rest. Every sound of breaking branches, every cry of a bird made him turn his head sharply. Danger was everywhere. He knew men were hunting for the girls, not to save them, but to sell them, to use them, to break the heart of their mother for gold. The girls whispered to him in soft voices, their alien tongue mixed with words he barely understood. Why do you help us, human? You are not like us. Why do you carry us when you could leave us behind? He looked down at them, his voice rough but kind. Because you deserve to live, because no child should be lost to darkness, and because someone is waiting for you who loves you more than life itself. The older daughter, her eyes glowing, faintly in the dim light, touched his face with her small hand. You are strange, human. The others fear us, they call us cursed, but you carry us as if we are your own. His jaw tightened. He gave no answer, only held them closer. His secret burned inside him like fire. For this human was not just any wanderer. He had once stood on the battlefield between humans and the Queen's armies. He had seen her from afar, tall and proud, her crown shining. And he had thought her cold, untouchable. Yet when he found her children alone in the ruins of an ambushed convoy crying, covered in dust and fear, something inside him broke. He could not leave them, not even if it meant death. He had told no one, not even the children, the truth of what he had seen, that the attack was no accident, that soldiers loyal to greedy lords had tried to take the girls and hide them. Not knowing the human was watching from the shadows, he had struck fast, taken them, and fled before their cries could bring more hunters. Since then he had been running, carrying them across forests, rivers, and deserts. The Queen did not know, the palace did not know. Only he carried this secret, that her daughters still lived, safe in his arms, though not for long if the hunters found him. Back in the city, the rumor of the human grew louder. Posters with his rough image spread on wooden walls. His description passed from mouth to mouth. Tall, scarred face, foreign clothes, carrying 2 children, the people whispered in markets and taverns. Some cursed him as a thief who had stolen the royal blood. Others prayed he was a savior, but none knew the truth. In the palace, the Queen heard these rumors with burning hope, her heart beating faster with each whisper, but her council doubted. It is a trick, they warned. No human would protect royal blood. He would use them, sell them, or worse. The Queen silenced them with a glare. Until I see with my own eyes, I will not believe in their death. Her voice carried strength, but when she was alone, she trembled. The human, meanwhile, found refuge in an abandoned farmstead. The roof broken, the walls weak, but it kept the wind out. He set the girls down, gave them a little bread, water from his flask, and tucked them into a blanket. He sat near the doorway, sword across his knees, his eyes never closing fully. Sleep came only in broken moments. That night, the younger daughter woke with a cry. I dreamed of Mother, she whispered. She called for us. She could not find us. The human pulled her close, holding her until she calmed, his own chest tight with pain. Soon, little one, soon you will see her again, he said, though in his mind he wondered if he could truly keep that promise, for already, torches moved in the distance, figures sweeping the countryside, searching. He knew time was running out. His secret could not stay hidden much longer. In the palace, the Queen stood on her balcony once more, her golden eyes fixed on the horizon. She whispered into the wind, Whoever you are, human, if you carry my daughters, if you guard them, I will give you anything, even my throne, just bring them back to me. Her voice was both prayer and promise. The human, miles away, whispered almost the same words as he held the sleeping girls. I will not fail you, not while I still draw breath. And so the kingdom mourned, not knowing that their salvation was moving quietly through the night, carried in the arms of a stranger with a dangerous secret. The wastelands stretched wide under the burning suns, a place of dust, broken stone, and endless wind. The human moved quickly across the cracked, ground, carrying the two small alien girls close against his chest, their faces hidden in his coat, their little arms clinging to him with fear. Behind him, the sound of riders grew louder, hunters on beast-like mounts, their torches glowing in the dim light of dusk, their voices sharp as they called to one another. The human is near, find him, the reward is great. The human's heart pounded, his legs heavy from days without rest, yet he did not stop. The girls looked up at him with wide, frightened eyes. Will they catch us? The younger one whispered, her voice trembling. He shook his head quickly. Not if I breathe, not while I can still run. He tightened his hold, his eyes scanning the horizon for any shelter. But the wasteland offered little, only jagged rocks, dry canyons, and the howling wind. The human ducked into a narrow gorge, his boots slipping on loose stone. He pressed himself against the walls, holding the children silent as the riders passed above, their shadows falling across the rocks like claws. When the riders moved on, he allowed himself a breath, but not for long, for he knew they would circle back. The chase was not over, it had only begun. That night he lit no fire. He gave the girls a few crumbs of bread, the last of his water, and told them stories in a low voice to calm their fears. Long ago, he said, there were warriors who carried light through the darkest nights. They never gave up, no matter how strong the storm. We are like them now, carrying hope, carrying life. The girls listened, their eyes heavy with sleep, and soon they rested against him, their small breaths steady. But the human did not sleep. His sword lay across his knees, his eyes fixed on the shadows, and sure enough, in the distance, he saw faint lights, torches moving across the horizon. The hunters were still searching, still coming closer. Back in the palace, the queen received reports from her scouts, whispers of a human seen in the wastes, carrying children. Her heart leapt, but her advisors warned her again. It may be a trap, my queen. No human would protect your blood. It is madness to hope. She turned on them, her voice sharp as steel. Then call me mad, for I will never stop hoping. Still, doubt gnawed at her heart. What if it was not true? What if she believed only to have her soul broken again? But her mother's heart told her the truth, that her daughters still lived and someone was guiding them home. Meanwhile, in the wastes, the human pushed on, each day harder than the last. His throat dry, his muscles weak, but the sight of the girls gave him strength when they smiled even faintly. He felt fire return to his steps. One more mile, he whispered again and again. Just one more mile. But the hunters grew clever. They cut across the land, blocking paths, laying traps. One evening, as the human moved through a canyon, he heard the whistle of arrows, stone cracked above him. He threw himself forward, shielding the girls with his body as rocks tumbled down, dust filled the air. The girls cried out, clinging tighter. He rose slowly, blood dripping from his arm. But he did not stop. He lifted them again and pressed on. Through pain, through darkness, the sound of the hunters chasing close behind. The older girl pressed her glowing eyes against his cheek, whispering, "Why do you keep fighting for us, human? You do not know our mother. You do not know our home." His breath came hard, but his voice was steady. "I know enough. I know you deserve to live, and that is reason enough." That night, he found shelter in a cave, its walls sharp with crystals that reflected the moonlight. He sat against the stone, the girls curled up in his lap. He listened to the echo of the wind outside, knowing the hunters were not far. Far away, the queen stood once again at her balcony, the wind whipping her long hair. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Hold on, my little ones. Whoever carries, you, guard them, for they carry my soul as well." The chase stretched on, a game of shadows and silence, the human against the hunters, the wasteland itself a cruel enemy. Yet through it all, he never let go of the girls, never loosened his grip, for he knew if he faltered even once, they would be lost forever. And so the night deepened, the torches of the hunters moving closer, the human clutching the daughters tighter, his breath ragged, his steps heavy, the wasteland echoing with the sound of a chase that would decide the fate of a queen's heart. The canyon was alive with the clash of steel and the cries of battle. The queen's guards fought fiercely, their glowing spears cutting through the hunters. Torches fell, Beasts screamed, dust rose in clouds, yet in the center of it all stood the human leaning on his sword, his breath ragged, his body trembling from exhaustion. The queen knelt on the ground, her arms wrapped tightly around her daughters, tears running freely down her cheeks. She pressed her face against their hair, whispering their names again and again as if afraid they might vanish if she stopped. "You are safe now, my little stars. You are safe." The girls clung to her, but even as they buried themselves in their mother's embrace, their eyes turned back to the human. He stood only a few steps away, blood on his arm, dust on his face, his clothes torn, yet his eyes still watching over them, still guarding, as though his body had forgotten how to stop. The queen lifted her gaze. Her golden eyes meeting his for a long moment, neither spoke, but the silence carried more than words. She saw in his face the nights of struggle, the storms he had crossed, the wounds he had taken, all for the sake of her children. Finally, she rose to her feet, her daughters still clinging to her hands. She stepped forward slowly, the battle still raging behind her, but her focus only on him. "You carried them," she said softly, her voice trembling. "You kept them alive when even I could not." The human bowed his head slightly, his voice low and rough. "They are not mine, but I could not let them fall into the dark." He looked at the children then, his chest tightening. "They gave me reason to keep walking when I should have fallen." The younger daughter broke from her mother's grasp and ran to him, her small arms wrapping around his waist, her voice clear. "Do not leave us," she whispered. The older sister followed, her glowing eyes wet with tears as she clung to him as well. The queen watched, her lips parting in shock. For though she was their mother, though she was their queen, it was the human who had been their shield, their warmth, their protector. She stepped closer, her voice stronger now. "You risked your life for them, and for that, I owe you more than words. I owe you more than a throne could give." But the human shook his head, his eyes dark with humility. "I want no throne, no reward, only to see them safe where they belong." He gently released the children and guided them back toward their mother, his rough hands brushing their hair, his heart heavy as though letting go of a part of himself. The daughters hesitated, torn between the arms of the queen and the arms of the stranger who had carried them through fire and storm. The queen saw this and stepped forward, her voice soft but firm. "Do not fear, little ones. He will not leave us. Not now. Not ever." She turned to the human, her eyes sharp with both command and gratitude. "You will come with us, human. You will not walk the wastes again, for you have become more than a wanderer. You have become part of our story, part of their lives, and for that, you will never stand alone." The human lowered his head, unsure how to answer, but the daughters clung to him once more, pulling him toward their mother, their voices pleading, "Stay with us." And in that moment he knew he could not walk away. The battle ended, the hunters slain or scattered. Silence fell over the canyon once more, broken only by the wind and the soft sobs of the queen as she held her children close. The guards lowered their weapons, bowing their heads in respect, not to her alone but to the weary human who had stood unbroken against the storm. Together they walked back toward the city, the queen at the center, her daughters holding one hand, each the human walking beside them, his sword sheathed at last, his steps heavy but steady. The people who saw them return fell to their knees, their cries of joy rising to the sky. That night the palace was no longer silent, its halls no longer empty. The daughters ran once more through the golden corridors, their laughter echoing like music. The queen sat with them, her arms never letting go, her eyes shining with life again. And in the shadows of the great hall, the human stood quietly, watching, his heart at peace for the first time in many years. He had no crown, no title, no power, but in the eyes of the children, he had become something greater. The queen turned toward him, her voice carrying across the hall. "The galaxy will remember this day, the day a human saved a queen's heart." And so the story of despair became a story of hope, a story of loss turned into life again. For though the daughters had been gone without a trace, They were now safe, alive, and forever remembered in the arms of both their mother and the human who refused to let them go. The palace stood high above the city, its black towers shining in the light of the twin suns, but inside the throne hall, the air was heavy with sorrow. The alien queen sat on her crystal seat, her shoulders weighed down not only by the crown, but by the grief that had hollowed her heart. Every day, new reports arrived from scouts. Every day, new rumors reached her ears. Some said her daughters had been sold in the dark markets. Others claimed beasts from the mountains had devoured them. Still others whispered of a human carrying children through the wastes. But no one brought her proof. No one brought her the truth. The queen's advisors urged her to accept the loss. They pressed scrolls into her hands, urging her to name a new heir, to prepare for the future, to think of the empire. But she slammed her hand against the throne arm, her voice sharp. Do not speak to me of heirs. Do not speak to me of futures, when the light of my heart still burns out there somewhere. Her golden eyes glowed with fury, silencing them all. But when the chamber emptied, and she sat alone, her anger broke into despair. She left the throne room and walked the long halls of the palace, her footsteps echoing against stone. She stopped outside her daughter's chambers, the doors carved with patterns of stars and moons. Slowly she pushed them open. Inside, everything remained as it had been. 2 small beds neatly arranged, blankets folded, toys waiting on the shelves. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, falling on empty sheets. The queen walked to the beds, her fingers trembling as she touched the pillows. They were cold, untouched for weeks. She sank to her knees between the beds, pressing her forehead against the floor. And for the first time since the night of their disappearance, she let her tears fall freely. The palace maids found her there. Hours later, her robes wet with tears, her crown slipped from her head. They dared not speak. They only bowed and left her alone. The queen lifted her head slowly, her face pale, her voice hoarse. They are not gone, she whispered to herself. I will feel their last breath if they are taken, but I do not. I still feel them, faint like a heartbeat far away. Far from the palace, across the wastes, the humans still carried the daughters, fighting against the endless pursuit of hunters. The girls grew weaker with every passing day, their small hands clutching his torn coat, their eyes dim with hunger. Yet they clung to him, whispering the same word again and again. Mother. The human's heart ached. He promised them again. I will bring you to her. No matter the cost, I swear it. He tightened his arms, pushing forward though his legs shook with exhaustion. Back in the palace, the queen stood before the sacred fire in the temple chamber, her hands raised, her voice breaking as she prayed. O stars, O ancient light, if you hear me, if you see me, return them, or let me trade my crown, my blood, my life for theirs. The flames roared higher for a moment as if answering, but then fell back into silence, leaving her alone once more. Her despair grew deeper, her strength fading. She no longer attended the morning councils. She no longer ate at the feasts. Her people watched from a distance, whispering that the queen was broken, that without her daughters she would never rise again. One night as she stood on her balcony, the wind cold against her face, she saw torches flicker in the far distance, travelers moving through the wastelands. For a moment her heart leapt. Could it be them? Could it be the human carrying her children? But the light soon vanished, swallowed by the night, leaving her with nothing but emptiness. Her despair became her shadow, following her into every chamber, every hall. But still, deep within, a spark remained, faint and fragile, but alive. She whispered into the darkness. Hold on, my children, if you can hear me, hold on, for your mother still waits. And far away, as the human sat in a ruined shelter, the girls asleep against his chest, he whispered almost the same words. Hold on, little ones, your mother is still waiting. Neither knew how close or far the other truly was. Neither knew how many dangers still stood between them. But both mother and protector carried the same fire in their hearts. The empire mourned. The palace wept. The queen despaired, yet hope, though buried deep, refused to die. The wastes stretched into broken cliffs and dry valleys, the air sharp with dust. The human pressed forward, his arms heavy with the 2 alien daughters. their small faces pale from hunger and fear, his steps uneven but his grip unshaken. Behind him, the sound of pursuit grew louder, hunters riding on beast-like mounts, their voices carried by the wind. "Find him. The reward is greater than gold," they cried, their torches cutting through the dark. The human's heart pounded. He had run for days, fought through storms and traps, but now there was nowhere left to hide. The canyon walls closed in around him, high stone cliffs rising on both sides. The hunters blocked the way forward, their torches forming a ring of fire. The older daughter clutched his neck, her voice trembling. "They will take us, won't they?" The human shook his head sharply, his jaw tight. "Not while I live, little one, not while I can still stand." He set the children behind him, close to the canyon wall, his coat wrapped around them, his sword drawn, the blade dull with use. But steady in his hands, he stood tall, though his legs shook with exhaustion, his eyes fixed on the hunters as they closed in. The leader, a scarred mercenary with armor made of bone, stepped forward, his voice deep and mocking. "Human, you are far from home. Give us the royal blood, and we may let you crawl away with your life." The human's voice was low, filled with iron. "You will not touch them." His grip tightened on the sword, his stance unbroken. The hunters laughed, their voices cruel. "A single man stands against us all? You will fall, human, and the children will be ours." But the human did not move. His breath came heavy, his chest burned with fear and pain. Yet he planted his feet firmly, a wall of flesh and bone between the daughters and the enemy. "If I fall," he said softly, "I will fall forward, and I will take you with me." The girls clung together, their eyes wide with terror, but also with something else. Trust. Trust that this human would not abandon them. Trust that he would stand even if the world broke around him. The mercenary raised his weapon, giving the order to advance. The hunters spread, circling like wolves. The human raised his sword higher, his body ready to break but his spirit burning. At that moment a sound echoed across the canyon, the distant cry of horns, sharp and clear. The hunters froze, their heads turning toward the cliffs. Shadows moved on the ridges above. Banners caught in the wind, and a voice rang out like thunder, "Enough!" The hunters stumbled back as the queen herself appeared, her golden armor shining in the torchlight, her long cloak billowing, her eyes blazing like fire. Behind her came her royal guard, their weapons drawn, their spears glowing in the night. The human's breath caught. He turned his head slowly, his eyes meeting hers across the canyon. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to stop. The queen's gaze fell on the two small figures behind him, her daughters, their glowing eyes staring back. "Tears already running down their faces, mother!" the girls cried out, their voices breaking the silence. The queen gasped, her hands trembling, her crown slipping as she staggered forward. Her daughters alive, her daughters breathing, her daughters standing in the shadow of a human. "The hunters," snarled, desperate to claim their prize, but the queen's voice rang out sharp as steel. "Touch them and you will know death before your next breath." Her guard surged forward, weapons raised. The human stood his ground, his sword still ready, his body shielding the children until the very last. Though now the queen's army surrounded the canyon, though now the hunters were cornered, he did not step aside, not until the queen herself reached him. She stopped only a few steps away, her eyes never leaving her daughters, her lips trembling as she whispered, "My little ones." Her voice cracked, but the girls ran to her, throwing themselves into her arms, their cries echoing through the canyon. The queen held them tight, sobbing against their hair, her hands shaking, her heart breaking with joy. She looked up then, her eyes meeting the humans again. There were no words at first, only silence between them. But in that silence, she saw the truth. He had risked everything, bled for them, carried them through hell itself, and never once let them go. The hunters, now trapped, tried to flee. But the queen's guards struck fast, blades clashing, cries filling the air. The canyon roared with battle, but the queen's focus remained on her daughters, alive in her arms. Safe at last, and standing before her, bloodied, broken but unbowed, was the human who had made it possible.